Hello and welcome to Powers of the People with me, Graeme Pryce. Now, it's been a few days since I released a video, but I was hanging on to see what would be announced in the spending review. Obviously, political videos struggle to be, evergreen content, and I didn't want to release one that would be made obsolete by Rachel Reeves within, 48 hours. A friend of mine rolled his eyes and said, "Haven't you seen through Labour and Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer yet?" A couple of months ago. And that was actually the reason I ended up making a video about Keir Starmer and the follow-up video to it. But the thing is, I know Labour have done some very good things and are shaping up to be a far more competent force for good and progress than the Tories ever were. But as always, they seem completely incapable of telling anybody about it in any meaningful way. Well, that's not my job either, is it? Though it's you and me that suffer the consequences of their incompetent comms operations when we see twats like Farage climbing in the polls, or have to mix with the kind of idiots I talked about in the last video, who have been indoctrinated into this weird belief that nobody supports Labour anymore. There's certainly been highs and lows of the first year of Labour being in government, and I wanted to find out some of the differences between what we expected and what we actually got from them. I'd imagine the comments from Reform idiots who haven't actually watched the video will be quite interested on this one, if they've got the nerve to speak up. We'll find out right after this. 'Tis Power to the People with Graeme Pryce, where sometimes he's naughty or nice. If you like the vibe, hit like and subscribe. But don't hit the like button twice. Thank you. Right, well, before we go anywhere near the spending review, I want to tell you a few things I expected Labour to do straight away, and the fact that they haven't done any of these things really offends me. And while I will still gladly step up to deny that Starmer is a red Tory, or the Labour Party are red Tories, I can't deny that I'm quite angry that they haven't proven they are decent people by cancelling these horrific, poverty-enabling far-right policies that attack the poor that the Tories put into place. I wanted them to end benefit sanctions. I can't believe benefit sanctions are still in place a year after Labour took office. I've been meaning to make a video about it for a long time, but I've never quite gotten round to it. Benefit sanctions were one of the things that utterly convinced me of how evil the Tories were and how much they wanted to intentionally hurt the poorest and most vulnerable people in society. And yes, I know, benefit sanctions were actually introduced by Labour. I think it was Yvette Cooper's idea originally. But the Tories completely changed the way that benefit sanctions were applied. Under Labour, less than 1 in 10,000 people were ever sanctioned, and disabled people, single parents and those below a certain threshold of income were exempt from the threat of sanctions at all. The Conservatives changed that. I won't recite the countless horror stories, but suffice to say that the Tories made it so you could be a person with a child living on your own in a bedsit with severe depression and one fucking leg, and you could still be sanctioned for turning up at the job centre at 3:02 instead of 3 p.m. That's absolutely fucking disgusting, and as far as I can tell, Labour haven't made any significant changes to that system yet. But I will be fair to them. If you look at charts about it, since Labour took office, the amount of benefit sanctions has fallen. I suspect that's because of a combination of people who work for the DWP not feeling pressured to sanction people anymore, and incompetence. After 14 years of Tories operating government departments, though, I don't actually think it's anything to do with Labour. The 2-child benefit cap, they should have immediately scrapped that the moment they took office. They should have scrapped that before they scrapped the Rwanda plan. I could have accepted them saying that the economic situation meant that they had to look at it and maybe just make it extended to 3 children or 4 children. But they should have done something to address it. They absolutely needed to show the public that they didn't back that kind of policy and that kind of ideology. Why are children still living in relative poverty because of Tory policies nearly a year after Labour took office? There's something wrong there. Another one is something that doesn't seem to get mentioned as much nowadays, but it's the hated bedroom tax, and it's still in place as far as I can tell. Labour haven't even mentioned it. Let me just explain it for people who, don't understand what it is and don't live in social housing. Imagine 55-year-old Brenda. She lives in a 2-bedroom terraced house in Burnley. She used to have 2 lads, but, they shared the other room and they've grown up and moved away now. All she uses the extra room for now is to store a knitting machine and her embroidery projects. And occasionally the grandchildren come to visit and she's happy because she's got a bed and, that she can let them sleep overnight with her. The Tories said that she was living in a property that exceeded her needs and was too large for her, and they increased her rent. Or if she received housing benefit, that would be reduced, leaving her to find the extra money herself. But Brenda should be in a 1-bedroomed flat, you'd hear on GB News or on GBB, or on the front of the Daily Mail, or from Jacob Rees-Mogg, or Carol Malone, or Priti Patel, or Ian Duncan Smith. Brenda only deserves a 1-bedroomed flat. She doesn't need a spare room. Thing is, she's getting a bit tired of having a garden. She doesn't really care about having a drive because she hasn't got a car. And she'd actually quite like a nice new 1-bedroomed flat in a modern apartment building. So she got in touch with the council and she said, I can't afford the bedroom tax. I want to move on. I need a 1-bedroom flat. What do you think they said? Do you think they said, yeah, we can find you one, couple of weeks, start setting yourself up, we'll get you moved? No, they said, sorry, Brenda. What we'll help you do is make a profile on property pool. And you'll have to learn to understand and use the complicated online system to bid for any properties that might come up in your area. But even if you win the bid for the properties, we might still decide that somebody else needs that property more than you. Somebody who's more ill, or, a young lady with some children or something. And then you'll have to start bidding for other properties. So get settled, Brenda, because you're in for a long ride. It'll take probably at least 3, maybe 4 years for you to even get a whiff of a council house or a council flat or anything to do with social housing. Settle down, love. They probably didn't put it like that. But that's the type of response you get from every council across Britain. Now, it does vary across the country. I'm well aware of that. But I have personally been on the housing list in this area now for over 2 years. And I'm no nearer to getting a council house now than I was when I signed onto the list in April 2023. All I want is a little, I don't care how small it is, just a little place with me and my dogs on the council. No. I'll be lucky to move by 2030. And meanwhile, there are no laws stopping my landlord increasing my rent as much as he likes. He did hike it recently. Or Brenda's landlord. Brenda's landlord could increase the rent by 90% if he wanted. And she is paying any increase that the landlord makes on top of the bedroom tax that the Tories invented and Labour haven't stopped after a year of being in office. Something wrong there, isn't there? I did ask for contributions on this video, and one that immediately came up, obviously, was, why aren't Labour taxing the wealthy? It's an absolutely valid question, isn't it? Well, there seems to be various explanations, and some of them make sense and some don't. There are definitely signs that they do want to take tax from the people in society with the broadest shoulders, but maybe not quite enough. Trying to tax the farmers backfired on them because Jeremy Clarkson and the Daily Mail are more popular than a press release from Keir Starmer, and they've been relentlessly attacked for trying to make rich bastards who want to send their kids to public school so they get an advantage over your kids, pay a little bit more. Despite how much I would obviously agree with taxing the mega wealthy a bit more, I do think we have to bear in mind that they'll be monitoring public opinion on these things. And as much as we hate to admit it, we live in a centrist country. The right of the centre don't like paying for anything, and they certainly don't like paying tax. I've got to say though, this threat of all the wealth creators will leave the country, well, that didn't seem to come true, did it? They aren't going anywhere because they can afford to live in the UK no matter how much it costs. Me and you can't. We're fucking stuck here though because of pig shagging twats like David Cameron or Nigel Froggage, and we have to pay £40 for a leg of lamb or £15 to park for 2 hours outside the hospital if we want to visit an old friend, because we live in the most overcharged, profiteered and cheated nation in the whole of Europe, and the Tories didn't give a shit about that and did nothing about it. It started with Thatcher in the early 80s, and Blair thought his government would just make everybody rich enough that it wouldn't matter that everything was ridiculously expensive anymore. And then we got the Tories back, and they gleefully fueled the biggest rise in inequality that this country has ever seen in its whole history, and left us with more poverty than practically every other country in Europe and the wider world. People are poor, struggling and angry about the fact that every time they put on the telly or read the paper, they see billionaires and millionaires living a life of luxury. I think it's a fundamental fact that if Labour don't change that, they'll lose the next election. They're going to have to try to find the balance and try to find a way to make it appear to the public that they are taxing the wealthy, while not actually taxing the wealthy so much that they have grounds to run to GBBs or the Daily Mail and spread another massive smear story that about how some poor bastard who lives in £1 million house in Essex can only have 3 holidays abroad this year instead of 5 because he's paying so much in tax to send Tarquin to the local public school. Let's move on. Some people mentioned the PIP cuts and the welfare changes, and I also think that is entirely valid. No true Labour Party would ever make the poorest people in society even poorer, and that especially applies to disabled people. But I'm going to sit on that one for a while and see if it actually happens. I think the U-turn on the winter fuel allowance could end up being mirrored in the PIP policy as well. I bloody hope so. But I will say that I'm keeping an eye on that one. Might talk about it again in the future, so I'm not going to elaborate now too much. Somebody asked about Labour abolishing ID to cast a vote. I can't find anything that they've said that relates to that. But what I will say is that when they were in opposition, all of them as a bloc voted against it when the Tories tried to introduce it. Obviously it didn't make a difference because the Tories had a majority, but I do think they did it because they believed in it rather than because they were whipped to do so. I'm intending to make a video about voting age and stuff like that soon, and talk about the voting age being reduced to 16. So I'll look into it then more and see what we can find. There were a couple of viewers that said I should make sure that I look at the positive things Labour have done now. And I certainly do think they've done some incredibly good things that are actually progressive and radical, but they aren't the things that GBBs or the Daily Mail are talking about though, are they? Hardly anybody who actually needs to hear it is getting a balanced and fair report on some of the stuff that Labour have actually done. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If Labour doesn't change the media before the next election, we'll end up with Nigel Farage as PM and living under a far-right idiocracy. They've got to tackle the media. So let's have a quick look at some of the good things that Labour have done that we should be pleased about. If you look in my back catalogue, there is a video I made months ago about a few of the good things that Labour have done since taking office. And if you actually have the intelligence, integrity and political impartiality to dig a bit deeper in the news, it's not hard to find evidence of loads more good things they've done. NHS waiting lists are at the lowest in years, and in loads of places across the country it's becoming easier to access GP appointments and stuff like that without a massive drama of having to phone them up at 8:30 in the morning. Don't get me wrong here, I know that there are some places that have seen very little difference, and I've heard some horror stories about people still waiting for mental health assessments or giving a GP appointment 10 weeks in the future. Imagine feeling ill and you phone up the GP and they say, we'll give you an appointment in 10 weeks. You can understand why people like that are angry. That's not okay, obviously, and I won't pretend that it is. But change is happening, and the NHS is in safer hands than it has been for years, despite Wes Streeting. I think I have to add that I don't support him in any way or his treatments of trans people. I've said it before and it's worth repeating. He's following Tory advice on how to treat trans people, and it's wrong, it's frustrating and it's offensive to people like me. He should be doing the exact opposite of whatever the Tories advised him to do, not taking their advice or the advice of the LGB Alliance. I don't want to get into my opinion of Wes Streeting here because I'm trying to keep this one positive. The changes to the way that water companies operate is very progressive, and while obviously there could be more, there could always be more, but Labour do seem to be trying to reverse the damage the Tories did to our waterways and coastal areas. I'd make it so people above a certain amount of salary are not entitled to a bonus anymore. If you get paid £1.2 million a year as the CEO of Thames Water, you shouldn't also be entitled to a £2 million bonus. What the fuck is that all about? Before I get carried away anyway, back to the script. I'd also make it so that the people responsible for turds floating down the Mersey actually go to jail rather than get bonuses or just get sacked from the jobs. But, maybe I'm being an extremist saying all that. I'm sure Nigel Farage would say I'm being an extremist. The whole energy infrastructure thing is a little bit similar, but Labour are also making some quite positive and progressive changes there. I've got to say though, until I start seeing a large reduction in my energy bills, I'm not that impressed by Keir Starmer making speeches about building nuclear power plants. I do think it's the right way to go, but until it makes my life better, I don't think it's necessarily a vote winner. For decades, the public has cried about public companies owning our railway services, and Labour have actually began to take them back into public ownership. But it's obviously been ignored by 90% of the media, because 90% of the media is owned by greedy right-wing twats who want Labour to fuck right off so they can get a far-right government into office that won't make them pay any tax. If you want to see an example of the stupidity and hypocrisy of the right wing. Check their reaction to the announcement about Labour taking the first railway back into public ownership. They're hating it because Labour has done it, despite wanting it to be done for decades. But they'd be celebrating it as some sort of massive victory if Nigel Farage had done it, or Kenny Badenoch had done it. You can bet that. Despite neither of them having any actual power to do it. But, you know, they hate it because two-tier Keith Starmer, the farmer-harming kid starver, has done it. So, you know, they can't support it because of that, even though it's a good thing. Unfortunately, that's the world we live in now. Propaganda, lies, conspiracy, and comforting nonsense mean more to millions of people in this country than facts, honesty, or decency, or economic success. I'm aware this has gone on a bit. So, let's just finish on a roundup, hey. Labour have ended the Rwanda plan, returned over 30,000 failed asylum seekers, stopped Section 21 evictions, committed to building about 1,000 times more houses than the Tories ever did, negotiated a better deal with the EU than Ballbag Johnson did, made us a safer nation by taking the funding and integrity of our armed forces seriously, invested in energy that will be actually valid and useful in the future, while Nigel fucking Farage wants to open coal mines again in Wales. They've returned free school meal for children of parents on universal credit, dealt with world issues like Trump, Ukraine and the genocide in Gaza in a way that we couldn't have even imagined the fucking Tories would have done with dickheads like Liz Truss in charge. And they've made it so we can be taken seriously by the progressive, decent and left-wing countries of the world. Again, instead of being a right-wing clown show with people like Johnson at the helm. I have got a little bit angry while I was spitting out that part, but generally it's all a good thing. I don't know about you, but despite the stupidity of the winter fuel allowance thing and the PIP nonsense, I do feel like I'm starting to have a government that I can be reasonably proud of again. I never had that feeling at all when my nation was represented by duplicitous, dishonest, disgusting sacks of donkey dung like Boris Johnson. If you hate Keir Starmer, you go ahead and tell me why in the comments section. And I'm interested in why. And I want to hear you tell me what you think is wrong with Keir Starmer. But don't try and tell me that he isn't a better human being than Cameron, May, Johnson, Truss or Sunak ever were. And don't try and pretend to me that Labour aren't a better party than the Tories were. Because you're just wrong. And I'll find it really easy to make you look silly with facts and figures. Try me. Thank you for watching if you've gotten this far. Do you know what? There's just one more issue that I'd like to talk about. And I'd be very interested to hear your experiences regarding this one. I've been on the waiting lists of 3 local dentists for over 2 years now. And I called one of them when I was in terrible pain recently. And the receptionist, she literally laughed at me. The conversation went something like, "No, love, you haven't moved up the list at all now. Keep an eye on your emails. We'll let you know when we can see you. But it won't be any time soon. It's not worth ringing again to check. Honestly, it's really not worth it." I was sitting there in fucking agony. Toothache is one of the worst pains you can experience. Anyone who's had the worst kinds of toothache will agree with me on that one. Despite the fact that I have quite powerful prescription painkillers for Crohn's disease prescribed to me, and I'd had too many of them and some ibuprofen, I was still in terrible pain. Labour say they've added 700,000 NHS dentist appointments since taking office. But I certainly haven't seen the fucking benefit of them. I'm still getting laughed at when I'm sat here in agony by a snotty receptionist because I can't afford £15,000 for private dental treatments in the UK, or £5,000 to jet off to fucking Turkey and get a set of dazzling pearly whites. I wouldn't want turkey teeth, but I need a fucking NHS dentist to see me because I'm nearly fucking 50 and my choppers are failing me. It seriously affects my life. It affects my confidence. It affects my ability to eat. And I have to say, I might have started this channel 18 months, 2 years earlier if I wasn't just frightened of what horrible right-wing dickheads were going to take the piss of me about. And my teeth was one of those things. The couple of gold teeth that I've got are probably the most reliable ones in me gob. And I never paid for them. I can't imagine how different my life might be if me choppers didn't look like a row of vandalised tombstones in a graveyard on a council estate. Anyway, I'm rambling. If you want to donate the ludicrous amount of money it would take, after the Tories were in office for 15 years, to pay a dentist to fix my teeth, then I'd be overjoyed. But I know I'm not that lucky. I am lucky enough to have some cracking supporters though, and if you do want to chuck a few quid my way, you'll find the links to PayPal, Patreon and the Buy Me a Coffee page. Feeling sick because they've taken too many ibuprofen in the comments section. And the join button for memberships is, as always, below. Now obviously, that isn't all I have to say. It's not even as much as I'd like to say. But it is as much of what I've got to say as I'm gonna say today. Ta-da. Do you think you could eat another one of those chewy sticks? Do you think you've got room in your belly for another big chewy bone? I think you might have, I reckon if I give you a big chewy bone, you'll be able to polish it off, won't you? Yeah.